Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jed and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage, and we have a special guest on the show today, author Pete Croatto. He has written a book called From Hang Time to Prime Time, Business, Entertainment, and the Birth of the Modern Day NBA. The book is right here. I made sure it was front and center for you, Pete. So we're plugging the book, but also couldn't be a better fit for this show because basically we get off track and talk about the history of the NBA all the time. We're supposed to just talk about, what's going on, but Sap likes to, recollect. And I'm an old soul. I know all about, history of the NBA. I love talking about that stuff. So when Sap said, hey, Pete wrote this book, I was like, yeah, for sure. Bring him on. So Pete, congratulations on the book. How long have you been an NBA fan? Are you a lifer?
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for having me on, first of all. Am I a lifer? Let's see. I'm 43. I'll be 44 in a couple of weeks, and I've been an NBA fan since I was 13. So lifer-ish, a good stint as an NBA fan. Yeah, I've been a fan, since seventh grade, and now I'm in the I don't know 40th grade. So like it's been a it's been a it's so yeah I mean it's been I guess close to a lifelong obsession and interest, but I've been a sports fan since I was 6 or 7. So baseball's my first love, and the NBA stuck around a little longer.
And so you said around seventh grade. Was there a team or a player that really got you into the NBA to start?
Yeah, I think like everyone else my age, I kind of got into Michael Jordan because it was sort of like, an alien playing basketball. Here is this guy that just flew through the air and was just a magician. So I think if you're a casual fan, or if you're getting into basketball, like that's where my interest went, and that was me. But as I got a little older, about a year or two later, I got into the Knicks. I got into the Knicks teams with Ewing, John Starks, Anthony Mason, the Pat Riley coach team. So I strapped in for about 5 years of just abject heartbreak. So it was a nice team to have during my teen years. And, since then, over the past, I guess, 10, 15 years, I've kind of just been an NBA polyglot. Like I just love the teams, love the games. It's, I'm always, I can always find something to appreciate when I'm watching an NBA game. So yeah, my fandom has kind of shifted over the years.
Pete, obviously you said you're 43 years old, so you started following the sport in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Was the genesis of the book to kind of look back and see what took place before you became a fan, from the merger through the 80s, which most people feel the golden age of the NBA was the 80s. I think it is the greatest decade in NBA history. I also think that the last 10 years is the second best decade in the history of the NBA. But was that the genesis of writing this book?
Yeah, it was. That's a really good observation. Yeah, that's part of it, because I wanted to understand what happened before I was a fan, what happened before I got, to quote an unfortunate song lyric, knee deep in the hoopla. So, but it was also, as part of my, I guess, education as a sports fan, I read a ton of sports books, and a lot of basketball books. And in reading so many basketball books, I mean, I lost track. No book really delved deeply into the 70s and 80s. I mean, there were books about Larry Bird, and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson wrote memoirs or autobiographies, and there've been books about Jordan. But whenever those books would look at the 70s and 80s NBA, the early years before the NBA took off, there really wasn't a lot to chew on. There was reference to drug problems and the ABA, and a few things here and there, and you heard about Larry O'Brien, but there really wasn't a deep dive into that stuff. And I thought, what? I think there's a book about that era that could be written, and thankfully, I was able to take advantage of that. Knock on wood.
Now, doing research, did you try to reach out to writers who covered the sport back then? And the first two names that come to mind would be Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe and Peter Vesey of the New York Post. Those were the two prominent sports writers, basketball writers of that time. Did you reach out to them? And if you did, were they helpful, or did they shun you because you were writing your own book?
Oh, yeah, I definitely, the two of the first people I reached out to on the media side were Peter and Bob, because, they were just influential writers, and it's for listeners who who aren't familiar with those names. First of all, do yourself a favor and get 48 Minutes by Bob Ryan. Get Scribe, his autobiography. Those are two excellent books. Peter Vesey was basically Woj before Woj. In an era before cell phones and before Twitter accounts, like Peter Vesey covered the NBA like a blanket, and he was the ultimate insider. So yeah, I talked to both of them, and both of them were exceptionally gracious. Bob Ryan, both men could have said, fuck you, man. Like, this was our beat. This was our time. We're going to write books ourselves. And Peter, as far as I know, is working on a book or writing a book that I'm eager to read, and I hope it comes out soon. But they were exceptionally gracious. And that was the fun part about this book, was that, I reached out to Jackie McMullen, Bob Costas, Dick Stockton, Hubie Brown, Leslie Visser. And without fail, all of those people were just exceptionally generous with their time, and were happy to talk to me for sometimes on multiple occasions.
Pete, when you talk about the era, the 70s and the 80s, I was covering the league. I'm 58 years old, so I was a freelancer for ESPN. I worked for Time Warner Cable. Yeah. And the one thing about the NBA, all of those people you mentioned were very nice to me as well, breaking into the business. Peter Vesey and Bob Ryan being two of them, Leslie Visser, Jackie McMullen. It seems like the NBA community is more welcoming than any other sport. I think, first of all, the BBWAA kind of puts an arm's distance at everybody. I mean, they don't even want you in the press box. The NBA seems like a much more welcoming group than any other sport. Yeah,
I mean, that's been my experience. I mean, look, my career path is very twisty. I didn't start as a traditional sports writer. I was a newspaper reporter for a few years covering municipal stuff. And then I kind of worked, I don't know if it's a promotion or a lateral move, but I began working for trade magazines, and I got into sports writing by accident almost. It was something that I was interested in pursuing, and when I became a freelance writer, I kind of just drifted into writing about basketball. And you're absolutely right. There is such a communal vibe among the basketball media. And I don't know if it's because for so many people, for such a long time, basketball is sort of the third sport in American leisure. So I guess there had to be that camaraderie, that foxhole mentality. But it's so true. I can't imagine being a baseball writer or football writer. It seems to me that there is such a barrier to entry, not just from the writers themselves, actually not from the writers themselves, mind you, but from the league itself. The NBA, when I've dealt with them, has always been exceptionally open in terms of being available. And in my dealings with Major League Baseball and the NFL, it is tighter than Fort Knox. It is so hard to get in unless you do your homework and you have an entree. Both with basketball, and I think this is still the case now, it's still very much a welcoming community, because I think that's part of the NBA. That's always been the NBA's ethos, which is, you know what, if you want to cover our sports and talk to our players, sure, have at it. We'll let you know if there's a problem, but the door's open. And that it's been that way, I think, for at least since the 1980s.
Yeah, and I think you've seen that a lot in the way that they've approached social media too, and that they were really the first league, and for a period of time, the only league that was letting people actively disseminate their highlights, on unofficial channels. And the MLB still has a bug up their ass about anybody retweet, taking a highlight and putting it out on their own Twitter page or social media page. So I think the NBA sort of taken that approach, and as new technology and new means of communication have come up, still tried to really apply that for, anybody who's either trying to break in or even people who are established. I think it's more of like along the lines of what you talk about a lot in this book, is that, they look at it as a star-driven product and a personality-driven product. So they say the more eyeballs we can get on it, regardless of how, the better. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. The NBA is also knows all about partnership. They realized very early that, hey, you know what, if we can work with the press, if we can be available to the press, if we can open our arms to new members and make press members feel comfortable, we are ahead of the pack. And that is, I mean, if you look at, in talking to several African American journalists, they mentioned that to me. It's like, yeah, you know, Ron Thomas, who's with the San Francisco Chronicle, mentioned that. It's like, yeah, you know, I went to the NBA and the PR team was just so welcoming and so forthcoming. And the NBA also understands that there's that exposure is priceless. So that's the thing. They have always been at the forefront in terms of publicizing the game. So for example, that, you know, they were always, I mean, they were really on top of things in terms of video, in terms of VHS distribution, getting highlights on tape, working with CBS Fox to make sure that, you know, that they had properly packaged highlights. They were, you know, the NBA was really big on, you know, getting the right games to foreign markets, so that if you're a Tony Kukoc fan, and you were in Croatia, like, you were getting a Bulls game. This is right in line with what the NBA has always done, which is getting acquainted to a new technology, getting acquainted to a new form of distributorship. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me in the least that the NBA is very much has really kind of a very laissez-faire attitude when it comes to highlights and, oh yeah, you know, use this, use that. And meanwhile, you know, the NFL and Major League Baseball, again, like they're still operating as if the fans are inconveniences rather than partners. And, you know, I think that's going to be a detriment in the long run.
So you talk a lot in the book, you know, about sort of this transition from the NBA being kind of like, I think maybe you even use the word podunk league, like it's, you know, it's regional. The finals are on tape delay.
Yeah.
And to now to obviously what's just a business and entertainment powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Was there, in your research, and I know you talked to over 300 people, which is an incredible accomplishment in and of itself, just talking to 300 people. I have like 20 people that I want to talk to in my life, let alone, you know, 300. I can't even imagine. But was there like maybe like a come to Jesus moment amongst the NBA ownership, or was it Larry O'Brien or David Stern who said, we need to change the way we do business in order to grow the sport, in order to kind of maybe vault a little bit closer to where baseball is, where football is, put us ahead of hockey? Was there one moment, or was it just sort of like a logical progression of, okay, we need to do something?
I think it was a logical progression, but it was fueled by David Stern and his undying belief that the NBA was an entertainment league, that the NBA was only going to succeed if it thrived on highlighting personalities and not just the teams and the game. So David Stern becoming commissioner in 1983 was yes, it played a big role in the NBA's growth. But that happened even well before, when Larry O'Brien was the commissioner, and he basically tasked David Stern with running the league. Mm-hmm. You know, Larry O'Brien, the commissioner who was elected in '75, was, you know, he was a veteran politician. He was a big deal in Democratic. So he was a national figure, cover of Time magazine, member of JFK's Irish Mafia, Postmaster General. He was not somebody who's going to, you know, roll up his sleeves and get to work and move things around. He tasked David Stern with doing that. And David Stern had lots of ideas about the NBA. And one of them was, you know, we are an entertainment league. We're Disney. And so we're going to treat the league like as an entertainment entity, not as a sports league. And so, I think that attitude was the come to Jesus moment. And I write about this in the book. David Stern had a vision. He had a vision that, you know, that the players and the league were going to work hand in hand, that the NBA was going to be this entertainment entity. And that's what he sold. He sold potential employees on. Like, look, you know, we're going to do this. We're going to get to this point where we're the Disney of sports, but I need your help. And that was intoxicating. And so David Stern brought people to him, and then got him on board with what he wanted to do, which was to, you know, again, which, as I've said repeatedly now, was, you know, turn the NBA into Disney and High Tops.
The league was also fortunate to get Dr. J, Larry Bird,
Yes.
Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, 4 different personalities who embraced being the face of the league.
Mhm.
And that really expanded the league. And then they got really fortunate when the Lakers and Celtics met 3 times in the finals over a 4-year period. And
Mhm.
that was must-see TV. I know I covered those series.
Yeah.
And it was polarizing. You were either on Team
Mhm.
Green or Team Purple and Gold. And being in Boston at the time and covering the series, deeply rooting for the Lakers, but not publicly, was difficult. When Magic hit the junior hook shot in game 4 of the 87 finals, I was like, yeah. And because I just want to be a contrarian, and that Magic was my favorite player of the era, but
Yeah.
they were fortunate to have those 4 guys who were so different, but they all understood what they were there for.
We
Right,
wouldn't have been friends, Sap. If I were born
No,
at that time,
no.
they would have demoed the show. It would have
No.
not been okay.
No.
I hope you guys would have been able to coexist, but but those players, I'm glad you mentioned them. They benefited from David Stern and from David Stern's again vision, which included television, which included look. We are not gonna make these games about Team A and Team B necessarily, but we're gonna frame it around these great players. So yeah, so when CBS, when the NBA renewed its contract with CBS in '83. Which was, at that point, the NBA was sort of struggling on CBS. The coverage was less than inspired. CBS came up with a plan that, that obviously the NBA agreed upon, which was, look, if we have 2 games on a Sunday, one of those games are going to feature one of 4 players: Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Dr. J, or Larry Bird.
Right.
So that was the key. The key was to get those players and to showcase them and to make sure that you saw them. And it was, but a lot of that has to, and again, the rivalry with Magic and Bird was huge. That's an absolute, because that becomes just basic good narrative television. That becomes good drama. So if you're not a basketball fan, or you're a casual basketball fan, you can root for the green guys or the yellow guys, and those teams are so different and so dazzling that you're attracted to them, and the packaging matters. But with Dr. J and Michael Jordan, the NBA got really lucky because Julius Erving was just the perfect spokesman for that league. He was somebody who, at the time, the NBA needed, because not only was he available for every media opportunity, as you probably know, but he was eloquent, he was dignified, he was a dream. Like you could be a parent and say to your son or daughter, be like Dr. J, like look at him, like he has everything going for him. And with Michael Jordan, he was just such an entertainer. But not only that, but he was so media savvy, and he knew the game in terms of what he could bring to the table, what the public expected from him, that it was a natural fit. I've said this before. I think David Stern probably got on his hands and knees each night and prayed to the God and thanked the gods for sending Michael Jordan his way, because he completely understood what his role was. And so and not only that, but what gets overlooked, I think, too, is that Michael Jordan was also just a really good-looking guy. Like if he wasn't in the NBA, he probably would be an actor or a model. He had the looks that made him a natural pitch person, and this probably made David Stern dance a jig for 15 years. He had no edge to him. So like he wasn't going to go about and he wasn't go out and spout political opinions or talk about issues that meant something to him as a person or as a black man. He was just going to go out, play basketball, pitch some products, and just be the ultimate competitor. And for a country that still maybe wasn't used to having a black man as an entertainment figure, that was perfect. As a perfect alignment of factors.
In a sense, he was Tiger Woods before Tiger Woods, right? The good-looking guy who was the best player, who was not political. The NBA was also lucky in the 80s because you had all these great matchups. Dr. J went to the finals 4 times. Bird went to the finals 5 times. Magic went 9 times. Then you had Jordan, crashing the party. Later on in the NBA, we never got to see LeBron, Kobe Bryant in the finals, something we always wanted to see, but never were able to see. So that in some sense, luck played a little bit on its side, showing you how great those players were, that they were
Right.
constantly in contention all at the same time. But those finals really pushed the sport to the next level.
Right. You're absolutely right. But I would say this. I would say that you're absolutely right. And it would have been, and we kind of did get a little bit of a rivalry with LeBron going against Steph Curry 3 times, and those series with the Cavs and the Warriors. But by that time, by the time you get to certainly by the mid-aughts, late aughts, because late 2000s, pardon me, the Pandora's box is opened, and you don't need to necessarily have a team to kind of increase your value. I mean, LeBron James, with social media and especially social media fueling coverage, a person can be, an individual can be the star of the show, especially.
Right.
So yeah, but you're right though. I do kind of miss having those rivalries of like, hey, like the Celtics and the Lakers are facing off again. Ooh, that's interesting. But I don't know if fans are really missing that now. I think it kind of matters who the player is, and especially now in an era where player empowerment is the buzzword, and LeBron James makes a phone call and people come running to him. I don't really know if I really don't know if the team is as big a deal as it was back in the day.
See, Pete, I'm player over team. If LeBron played for the Denver Nuggets, I'd be a Denver Nuggets fan.
Yeah, and that's me too. Like, I don't care where any team plays now. Like, I just want to see a great game, and I want to see a great player, and that's the beauty now of being in an environment where you're not forced to watch one game every Sunday or 2 games every Sunday on a big 3 network, and you're not confined to watching whatever is on your regional sports network of choice. So I don't have to. I'm not confined to those options. I can watch LeBron James anytime. I can watch Russell Westbrook anytime. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think we're all connected more now to players than we were to teams back in the day. Maybe in the 80s and 90s, it was I think the exact opposite.
Yeah, I think, in a lot of ways, it does depend on the region too. Like, obviously here in Boston, people are very loyal to the Celtics. You see all the Celtics paraphernalia I have with me, and that's not even scratching the surface of what I have. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, 90% of my wardrobe is Celtics stuff. It's as big of a honk as it gets. But I feel like almost in a way, there hasn't really been the team versus team rivalries are kind of based off of old rivalries. Like when the Celtics and the Lakers met in the finals in 2008, and then 2 years later, it was based off of their older history, not their newer history. Because, both were kind of up and down in between that time, especially the Celtics in the 90s and early 2000s were terrible. The Lakers had a couple of years post Shaq where they weren't particularly good. And so like, I feel like almost the last like true rivalry at the time that was like sort of organic was maybe the Lakers and Celtics of the 80s, because it's not like in the 90s Jordan had really any real rivals. I mean, he faced a bunch of different teams. Utah was probably the closest thing, but again, they met twice a year in the regular season. They Karl Malone and John Stockton had nowhere near the star power of Michael Jordan. And then, in the early 2000s, the Spurs and the Lakers dominated. They weren't really rivals, probably because the Spurs weren't a very sexy team, and the East was terrible and was constantly getting just bludgeoned in the finals. So I don't know. Do you think we've seen the end of team versus team rivalries?
That's a really good question, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's funny. I just mentioned to Sap right now. The whole Cavs Golden State string of games, and those really weren't like deep, sexy rivalries. I mean,
it was like LeBron versus Steph, basically. It wasn't the two teams.
Yeah. It wasn't because there wasn't a history. There wasn't, and it didn't really get it. And again, they didn't play each other a lot. And again, now LeBron's not in the Cavaliers, and it's over. I never want to say never, because again, things could happen, and I look like a moron, 3 years from now. Not that I'm not never. I'm always a moron, but more so. But I would say yes. I mean, I do. Look, I think you're right. I think the tradition is going to matter. So I think if for some reason the Wizards play the Knicks, the tradition will be brought up of the Bullets and the Knicks because it's part of the tradition. And the Lakers Celtics, same thing. But again, I think with the players now having more freedom over as to where they go, and with super teams coming and going, I don't think you're going to see those deep-seated rivalries take place unless we get lucky. And for example, a team with a young nucleus meets a team with another young nucleus, and they meet 3 or 4 times before free agency blows everything to smithereens. That might be the only time you see that, but it's going to be rare if it happens at all.
So do you think that does that present a challenge for the NBA and now how they navigate their future landscape in terms of media and selling teams and stuff like that? Or are they just content with being able to say, okay, we have Giannis in the finals this year, we got LeBron in the finals this year, Luka in a couple of years, so I assume he'll get there too. Mm-hmm. Does Adam Silver look at this and say we don't really need the team rivalry so much anymore versus David Stern, who I felt like really pushed? Okay, he pushed the stars, but like Sap said, Celtics and the Lakers meeting, I mean, that was printing money.
Yeah, no, I if I'm Adam Silver, I'm not worried about the teams. I am more concerned about the player. And look, to me, for the NBA, the beauty of this year's past final was Giannis getting there, because not only did you have a nation of eyeballs eyeing this explosive young talent, the star finally becoming a superstar or reaching the next level of superstardom, but you also had how many people in Greece tuning into those games? How many people in neighboring countries watching those games? Like that to me so to me, if I'm Adam Silver, I am not concerned about the teams getting in there, but I am very happy when a player with international ties gets into a finals, because not only are you going to get the U.S. audience, you are also going to get that foreign audience because everyone likes to see the hometown boy do good. So that to me is what I'm looking for. What the NBA I think is going to focus on is they'll focus on the international implications of who's in that game, of who's in the NBA, of who's in the finals. But I don't know. There's all this talk about, and I'm curious to hear your guys' perspective on this, dwindling ratings and stuff like that. I don't really put much stock in that because, again, I think the NBA is a worldwide game, and if you have Giannis in the finals or Luka Doncic next year or Jokic, in a couple of years, like that to me is the plum. Like that to me is who you want, because you are then expanding to an international audience, which is which who knows how many people are enjoying the games when you reach that level.
Yeah, and there's just more ways to consume the product, right? It's not classic stuff like when I was growing up and you're watching the 70s and 80s and you're waiting for the tape delay version of the Lakers and Sixers in 1980, and you hope that you don't find out what the score is, which was easier back then than it is now. But now, even I will watch things on my iPhone or laptop or whatever the case may be. So yeah, there's just more ways to consume, but I still think it's a star-driven league because you saw the difference in the ratings with LeBron against Steph, LeBron against Kevin Durant in those finals were marginally or more than marginally better than what we saw this year. Again, because Milwaukee's not a real sexy team, although Giannis is a rising star. And we've had this discussion, Pete, and maybe get your opinion on this. Like, who's the future face of the NBA? It's been LeBron James for 12, 13 years. I think it went from Michael to maybe Kobe and Shaq for a little while, and then LeBron took over the mantle. But like once LeBron is out of the sport, which hopefully isn't for another 10 years, who becomes the face of the league? I have my opinion, which I think it's Zion Williamson, if he can be healthy and start to make the playoffs and get to like the conference finals, because he's got that type of package. As much as I love Giannis, sometimes and I don't want to get in trouble like Stephen A. Smith did, but sometimes and Giannis is very well versed in English. It's not it's not Shea Otani who needs an interpreter, but still it seems to me like an American has to be the face of the NBA. And look, if a lot of people watch this and want to go at me on that, it's just, I'm not saying what should be, I'm saying what is.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And, I will say this. I mean, the ratings were low this year. And that makes sense because, again, people are used to LeBron. That becomes part of their appointment television. But if Giannis gets back next year, the ratings are going to increase. I mean, you have to create new stars somewhere. So,
right.
So again, if Devin Booker shows up in a couple of years, like, oh, there's renewed interest. Who's going to be the face of the NBA? Man, that's a tough question. I mean, a couple of years ago, I'd say Steph Curry, but I mean, he's getting older too. And, I don't, so, I mean, I don't want to put my hat in the ring there. Zion is a tempting choice. I just don't know if there's enough of a sample size for me to say like, oh yeah, I'm going to hitch my wagon to this guy. I'm going to say Giannis for a couple of reasons. First, he now has the championship behind him and people love winners. Second, he is such a good kid. Like if you watch him during the press conferences afterward, him going to Chick-fil-A and ordering, a 50 piece. He's a kid that everyone, you can't help but smile when you see that guy. Like
and that's savvy, right? That's social media savvy right there.
But he's savvy, but he also has his head on straight. Like there's something about him that I just dig. And I think a lot of people are like, yeah, you know what, if you were my friend or my kid's friend, like I'd like that guy. I'd want to have him over for dinner. So I think Giannis is the star because not only do you have the championship pedigree, the likability, he's not going to be 27 until I think December. So there's time. And, and I think don't underestimate the Midwest as a market because you have a lot of states that are going to gravitate toward him that don't have a major media market. So, so I think I think Giannis has a ton of potential. The other thing too is, there's also Miran Fader just wrote a Giannis biography, which I have right next to me, that is only going to kind of cultivate that myth and get people talking and generate interest. So I think, so to me, Giannis is the place to go. In a couple of years, maybe Zion, but to me, I'm gonna hitch my wagon to Giannis.
I think that makes sense to me. I think because, like you're saying, all the social media stuff, just popping into my head was Sap and I talked a lot about this during the playoffs and how spectacular Trae Young was. He seems like a guy who could be it too. But I'm thinking of all the guys who have been like the face of the NBA. If you're not a spectacular dunker, can you be the face of the NBA? And I know the game's transitioned to 3-pointers, but I'm wondering, do you need that sort of crazy athleticism also to be? Obviously, we talked about Jordan, Kobe, LeBron. Those guys were all insane athletes. Trae Young, obviously a great athlete. Steph Curry, a great athlete, but they're not having the like crazy poster dunks that you typically would see, in a college kid's dorm on the poster, is not pictures of guys spotting up for threes.
Yeah, I that's a good point. I don't know if we,
Well, Bird and Magic weren't dunkers, but
that's true.
But they played for all-time franchises that met in the finals 3 times in 4 years. Dr. J obviously was spectacular to watch. Shaq was a cartoon character.
Yeah.
The other name I'm going to throw out is Luka, because Luka's game is more aesthetically pleasing than Giannis's game. And look, I'm not disparaging what Giannis accomplished. He's fantastic. He's probably the most likable star in the NBA. But Luka has more sex appeal than Giannis, doesn't he? Because he has a little bit of a bad boy image with him, a little bit. He's got kind of an edge.
Luka could work. I was also thinking about ground-bound players. I'm thinking of Bob Cousy back in the day.
Sure.
I think Trae Young can be a star. And look, as the game evolves, I think 3-point shooting is going to be just as sexy as a dunk. Because again, it's one of those things that a kid can look at and say, I can do that. A kid can look at Giannis or I'm trying to think or a high flyer and be like, I mean, that's amazing, but I can't do that. But they can look at Trae Young and say, like, that's amazing, and I can probably do that.
But do you need that sort of superhero like Jordan was to be that guy? Like, obviously what Jordan did was unattainable. Nobody can fly like him. So like, yeah, it's great to say, okay, yeah, I can do that. And I think that makes a player very popular. But like Steph Curry and Steph Curry and Trae Young, amazing shooters. Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of all time. And people, I think, love him because they go, yeah, I could, they can't, but they go, I could shoot threes. I can't dunk, but I could shoot threes. But like, almost, it seemed like Jordan and LeBron are like Marvel characters coming out, in real life.
But I mean, but you can, that's true. And I think there's always going to be that, you're always looking for that wow factor. Like, oh my God, he did that. But I think you can look, you can have that, but also don't underestimate winning. If Trae Young keeps hitting clutch shots and keeps showing the stones that he had during that playoff run and wins a couple championships, then that's a whole different ball game. But yeah, there are gonna be kids that want that Marvel character for sure. But I mean, isn't what Trae Young doing kind of a Marvel characteristic too? Pulling up from 35 feet and just swishing J's and I mean, there is that superhero element to Trae Young. And look, with any NBA player, look, not to sound not to get on the contrarian Skip Bayless path, but isn't any NBA player really a superhero when you think about it? Because these men are doing things that we can't even touch.
No, they're all freaks. They're all athletic freaks.
So I think it's gonna be a matter of, as the game evolves, how we reconsider things. And I think Trae Young's a great example of that, because Steph Curry was the example, was the poster boy, no pun intended for that. Trae Young is the next step. And before that you had Bird, and before that Maravich and Rick Barry and all these other shooters that kind of were superstars. So I think it can be done. But again, it's what do you prefer? Do you prefer Cyclops, or do you prefer Wolverine? Do you prefer Superman, or do you prefer the Flash?
And now you're speaking my language. Sap might be lost, but you're speaking my language.
Right over my head, guys. I mean, I know some of the stuff you're talking about. The one player who will not be the face of the league is Ben Simmons, right? Because he doesn't even want to be the face of his own franchise. He doesn't return calls. I mean, he looks to me like a guy, and we've talked about this, on our podcast, Pete, is that he looks like a guy that doesn't even like basketball. He's like really talented at it, but it looks like an inconvenience for him, right? Too. So maybe we don't have to spend much time on Ben Simmons, but I think he's the last guy we think will be the future face of the NBA. But it's an interesting proposition because I think LeBron is still there and still one of the three best players, and he's still got probably 3 or 4 years left. I don't think that Kevin Durant's ever going to be that guy, because he's kind of just a guy who likes to play basketball. He doesn't go through a lot of the BS that you need to go through to be the face of the franchise or the league. And plus, you don't know what's going to come out of his mouth or out of his tweets. I mean, he doesn't seem like the happiest guy, but man, he could ball. So yeah, Giannis, I think is a really good choice.
Yeah, thanks. No, and again, I think it's funny that what you said about Durant. That's why I love Durant, because like to me he is, and that's why I think NBA Twitter is. Can be delightful when it isn't scary as hell, is that you can see the players emerge as people, and that's what I like about Durant, is that Durant will just will go off on some knob criticizing him for doing something. It's like, oh wow, that's interesting. And Dame Lillard's the same way, just kind of shooting from the hip, and I like that. I think that approachability is extremely refreshing as someone who maybe has gotten too used to canned responses and PR handling. But yeah, I think I agree with you. I think LeBron right now is the face of the NBA. I think the fact, again, you do not get to spend, you don't make a movie with the Looney Tunes if you're not the face of the NBA. So I think it's LeBron until further notice. But look, I mean, the league is in good hands. I don't think anyone at the NBA is wringing their hands over, oh, what do we do if LeBron is, because that was the big thing when Jordan was retired or was getting for a certain age. It's like, what do we do now? Where do we go? And I don't think, I mean, I can't imagine anyone at the NBA fretting over that answer or fretting over that question.
Before we let you go, Pete, again,
Yeah.
I said you interviewed 300 people.
Yes.
Again, incredible. Any 1, 2, 3 interviews really stick out for you, or is there anybody that you really wanted to get that you weren't able to get?
Yeah, it's funny. The person I wanted to get, who I didn't get, was David Stern, and I tried and I tried and I tried, and I thought I had him. I honestly did, and I'll tell you why. Because I had emailed him repeatedly for months, like just crashing the boards. Just my thought was, you know what, like fuck it. If he's, I want to hear him say no to me personally, not from his assistant, not from his associates, like from him personally. So I just blitzed him like every week, every month. I was following up, like, hey, Mr. Stern, I know why I'm doing this. Like, you know that I'm yeah, you can tell I'm emailing him with the story.
Well, we've got 2 Italians and a Jewish fella here. So we all talk with our hands. We're all very emotional. Although I got to give you guys credit. I've got to up my game when it comes to, YouTube. Pete, you've got the great bookshelf with the great array of books. You've got the Athletics poster up. Yeah. You're looking really cool there. Jet's got an awesome looking thing. And I look like Keith Olbermann when he was on Current TV. I've got like a curtain behind me because they were paying him so much money that they couldn't afford a cent.
I was going to say... it was like Buffalo Bill's basement from Silence of the Lambs.
I know that's
you don't know that it's not. You don't know.
You don't know. I'm too nice a guy. I mean, I eat really good Italian food, not Italian people. But I think that when you were looking at trying to contact Commissioner Stern, was he already out of office at that point?
He was out of office
since 2014. So you're now reaching out to a private citizen who maybe said, I'm already done with this stuff.
Yeah, I had reached out to, by the time I started on work on the book, it was 2018. So he was out of the picture, but I was emboldened because I had friends, who had written stories and they had been able to reach David Stern. So it wasn't like I was chasing Howard Hughes. But I think when I reached out to him, I think he had already started to fade away a little bit. He didn't want to get embroiled in day-to-day stuff. So I reached out to him. Initially was given the cold shoulder by his assistant at the time, Linda Tossi. Then I had his email address, so I just kept at it. Eventually he wrote back and said, look, I don't know why you're trying to reach out to me. I'm not interested. I wrote back and said, well, look, I said, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't try to reach out to you. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't try to at least try and convince you to talk to me. And he said, yeah, I'm just not interested. He said, look, I'm just not interested. I wrote back to him one more time. I said, look, if you want to reach out to my parents and ask why I'm being such a persistent pain in the ass, here's their phone number, here's their email, reach out to them. And David Stern wrote back. He said, look, I don't need a parental explanation. I'm not interested. Best of luck with the project. And and we'll go forward. So unfortunately he died about 6 weeks later, but that exchange is in the book. It's in the appendix. So I really wanted to get David Stern. That was the one person who I tried to get, couldn't get him. But but I think there's enough, but 2 things. A, when you talk to 300 plus people, and you go through, some of the books in the back over there, and you go through newspapers.com and you hit the library, I was able to get a really good feel for who David Stern was and what he brought to the table. And to David Stern's credit, he didn't erect any roadblocks. He never told anyone, "No, don't talk to me." I never got the sense that David Stern provided any kind of subterfuge or obstacle. So, I wish I talked to him, but I don't think the book is any worse for his lack of participation. So, I would have loved to have gotten him. I would have loved to have talked to Bird and Magic and Michael, but I don't think they're really talking to anybody. From my understanding, Larry is just cut off communication from folks that he talked to regularly.
He doesn't have a phone. Yeah, no phone or computer for Larry.
Yeah, that's fine. Look, he brought me joy. He brought so many of us joy for years. Magic too. You know what? If they don't want to talk, that's their prerogative. And look, if they had talked to me, if I had for some reason gotten Michael Jordan on the phone or flown down to Charlotte to talk to him. Would he have been particularly open or forthright with me? Probably not. Dude that works in the middle of nowhere. Don't really know him from Adam. He's not going to be particularly open. And
just bring him whiskey though. If you brought him a bottle
cigars
of whiskey
and whiskey,
cigars, he would have been all set.
Look at me, man. I'm a freelance journalist. There's no budget there's no budget for whiskey or cigars or
especially the type that he would
sources.
like. Yeah,
right. Exactly. Yeah, maybe I'll buy him a quarter of a Cuban cigar, so maybe he can smoke the nub. But like, yeah, I'm a dude out here working the phone and just trying to get people to tell their best stories. So, you know what, I maybe in the next book, Michael will be forthcoming. I don't know. We'll see.
Are there plans for a follow-up book right now?
There is a book there. I did submit a proposal to my agent, so that she was very happy with. It is about basketball. That is all I will say.
Okay. The mystery is,
but
mystery
sells. I will say this: if you like the first book, you'll definitely like the second book. If everything goes according to plan. I'm still waiting to hear back to see what the story is in the proposal, but I'm hopeful. So there you go.
All right, Pete, thank you so much for joining us. Pete Croatto, the author of this book that is right next to me, From Hang Time to Prime Time, Business, Entertainment, and the Birth of the Modern Day NBA. Again, thank you so much for joining us here on the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We're presented by Full Press Coverage. Go check out Pete's book. This is my copy. You can't have it, but I'm gonna be digging more into it. And you know what? The fact that he had 300 interviews alone makes it worth reading, let alone the awesome anecdotes and stuff. If you're an NBA fan, check out the book. Can you get wherever books are sold, Pete?
Yeah, of course. You can get it from any brick and mortar bookseller. You can get it, online. It's available anywhere. I prefer you buy local if that's in your budget. If you want an autographed copy, copies are being sold at Odyssey Books. Bookstore in Ithaca. If you go to odysseybookstore.com and call them or email them, they will send you an autographed copy not free of charge, pardon me, for $5 extra. Yeah, they're a business. They're not a charity. Also, if that's too rich for your blood, I'm more than happy to send an autographed book plate. And I'll send that anywhere. I've sent ones to Italy, Wales, parts, disparate parts in the U.S. So yeah, I'm easy to find on Twitter and online. So yeah, just hit me up and I'm happy to mail an autographed book plate. So that's
what is your Twitter so everybody can follow you there? My
Twitter handle for those who want to follow my anecdotes and my Columbo references, it's at Pete Croatto, PETECROA, 2 T's as in Thomas O, at Pete Croatto. And you can also find links to buy the book and gentle and not so gentle reminders to buy the book. So yeah, that's where I do most of my damage.
Pete, I have a proposal for you. Interested in a Columbo podcast?
I wouldn't say no. I love Columbo. I mean, I'm behind on the episodes because life and the crushing reality that we're dealing with. But I am the proud owner of a Columbo box set.
There you go.
And I used to watch them every Sunday night on MeTV, like a 85-year-old. I would just
I was gonna say, who are you gonna market the podcast to? People who don't know how to even find podcasts. That's the problem.
There's a robust Columbo following. There really is.
Oh, absolutely. There's a robust Columbo younger following. People. Yeah, he was sensational.
No, that's right. I went to the local cemetery and they were all there. The Columbo.
Oh, you're a wise guy. Don't say that. I mean, I'm 58 years old, so I have an excuse. I mean, I give Pete a lot of credit here. He's following Columbo, which is great. But there's only 69 episodes, so the problem with it is every time I tune it in to Cozy or MeTV, it's like I've seen it 17 times. But he was fantastic. So I'll reach out. Maybe we'll do something like that.
I love Columbo, and not only 69 episodes, but I think there were like some 24 TV movies.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's actually sort of looking at close to 100. So you could there's material.
Absolutely.
It's just, I mean, once you illuminate the Patrick McGoohan and episodes, you're down to about 70 episodes, but it works out. No, I to me, Columbo is it is perfect comfort TV. It's well acted. It's well acted. It keeps you on your toes. And as you mentioned, Peter Falk was just marvelous in that role. I mean, if ever there was a marriage between actor and character, that was it. And the fact, and to me, any suggestion that Columbo gets remade or retooled is sacrilege. So to me, there's one Columbo, and that's Peter Falk, and that's it.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. You guys enjoy that podcast, and I'll be rewatching The Office for the 10th time. That's what I'm going to be doing.
God,
no.
I can't get into it. I cannot get into
neither.
The Office. I've tried. Yeah, no.
You guys have no sense of humor.
Well, no. I mean, I'm a Seinfeld nut. I mean, I still watch Seinfeld like around the clock when I can. I think it's the greatest show
I love
in the
Seinfeld
history of TV, followed by The Sopranos, All in the Family. I mean, I go back to the 70s with All in the Family. I'm the old bastard of the three of us, but yeah, no, The Office, every time I tune it in, I just can't get into it.
Yeah,
I can't do it. I can't do it. It to me, cringe humor only goes so far. Humor based on comfort only goes so far.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look, The Office. Hey, if that's your deal, that's great. It's just not for me. I don't know why. I could never hold on to it. But
hey, I'm with you.
To each their own. Some people like to make Columbo podcasts marketed towards 10 people. That's fine. All right, but the book is intended for a much wider audience.
Yes.
So go get the book.
More than 10 people.
There's a lot of more NBA fans than Columbo fans, I would venture to guess, out there. So make sure you check out Pete's book. Go buy it. Pete Croatto, thank you so much for joining us. And we will talk to you down the line. Hopefully we'll see who the next star of the NBA is and get your take on that.
Appreciate it, fellas. This is a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Pete.